Bill Gates, welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show.
It's great to be on.
Let's jump straight into the first question that everybody would want me to ask. You delivered a TED Talk where you predicted pretty much what is happening now. Now, thanks to the world we live in, that has sprouted a bunch of conspiracy theories, everything from Bill Gates invented this virus to prove himself right, or he knew it was going to happen and that's why he said it. Was that TED Talk about this virus, or was that a hypothetical that has now come true?
Well, I didn't know specifically that it'd be coronavirus and that it would hit in late 2019. But the goal of the talk was to encourage governments to make the investments so we could respond very quickly and keep the case numbers very, very low. And so sadly, this is not a case where, I feel like, hey, I told you so. Because we didn't use that time when it was clear as the biggest threat to kill millions of people to have the diagnostic standing by, to be ready to ramp up a vaccine factory. A few things were done. Some countries, our foundation funded some work that will help with the vaccines now, will help with the diagnostics, but most of what was called for, particularly in a New England Journal of Medicine article I did that went into way more specifics than I could in a short TED Talk, those things didn't get done, and so that's why it's taking us a long time to get our act together faced with this threat.
Here's a question I have. As an individual, how is it that you as a non-government knew this information and knew that it needed to be acted on, and governments and organizations that are specifically tasked with protecting people from this very thing either didn't have the information or ignored it? What do you think happened there? Because I know you interact with governments, you talk to organizations like the CDC, like the WHO. What went wrong?
Well, there are lots of individuals who were as worried as I was. People like Dr. Fauci, who've been through various epidemics. And so when we had Ebola, Zika, SARS, MERS, we were lucky that they didn't transmit very easily. They weren't these respiratory viruses where somebody who's not very symptomatic and is still walking around can spread the disease in some cases to literally dozens of people. So the respiratory transmission, particularly because world travel is so intense, that's where I show the simulation in that speech and say, this keeps me up at night more than even war, which is no small thing. And yet, in terms of being systematic about, okay, let's run a simulation and see how would we reach out to the private sector for tests or ventilators, and what kind of quarantine would we do? As we enter into this, we haven't practiced at all. And so you can see it's, every state is being forced to figure things out on their own. And it's very ad hoc. It's not like when a war comes and we've done, 20 simulations of various types of threats, and we've made sure that the training, communications, logistics, all those pieces fall into place very rapidly.
You are in an interesting position where in many ways you are an expert on this topic because of the work that you now do in philanthropy. Your goal has been to eradicate malaria across the globe, focusing in Africa. You work with infectious disease, you work with experts in and around infectious disease. When you look at the coronavirus as it stands now, it's happened, leaders acted late, but what do you think needs to be done going forward? You wrote an interesting op-ed about this, but what do you think we need to do from the ground up, from the people to the leaders to the private sector?
Well, the main tools we have right now are the behavioral change, the social distancing, which often means staying at home most of the time, and the testing capacity to identify who in particular needs to get isolated, and then testing their contacts to make sure that we can catch it so early that a lot of people who get sick don't infect anyone else. Now, so our foundation is engaged in projecting what's going to go on, the modeling. Our partner IHME is, telling each state what they should think about in terms of ventilators and capacity. Further on out, the work we're doing now to find a therapeutic, a drug to reduce the disease, to cut the deaths down, we're hopeful that even in 6 months, some of those will have been approved. But the ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good about sitting in a stadium with lots of other people, is to create a vaccine and not just take care of our country, but take that vaccine out to the global population, and so that we have vast immunity, and this thing, no matter what, isn't going to spread in large numbers.
Which countries do you think we should be looking to for models that work? And can we apply those models to a larger country like the United States? So, many people say Italy and Korea, yes, have their numbers, but they can't necessarily be applied to America. Is that true or not? Or is there a model that does seem to work and should be followed for everybody?
Well, countries have differences. South Korea did get a medium-sized infection, but then they used testing, enforced quarantine, contact tracing, and really bent the curve, even though it looked pretty scary there for a while. The epidemic in the United States is more widespread than it ever got in South Korea. So we're like the part of China, Hubei province, where a lot of the cases were in one city, Wuhan. And the US and China are different. The lockdowns that we do won't be as strictly enforced, but they are very, very important. The way we do contact tracing won't be as invasive, and so won't be quite as perfect. But it is very good news that China, although they're maintaining a lot of measures, they are not seeing a rebound. They're not seeing cases coming back, even though they are sending people back to the factories and sending people back to schools. And so thank goodness, if we're seeing a big rebound there, the idea you could keep it under control would, once you have a large number of cases like the US does and many countries in Europe, then it would seem almost impossible. So it can be done. China ended up with 0.01% of their population infected. Our goal is to stay so it's only a few percent, so at least the medical penalty isn't gigantic, even though the economic penalty will be very large. There isn't a choice where you get to say to people, don't pay attention to this epidemic. Most people, they have older relatives, they're worried about getting sick. The idea of a normal economy is not there as a choice. About 80% of people are going to change their activities. If you get the other 20% to go along with that nationwide, then the disease numbers will flatten, hopefully in the next month, and start to go down, hopefully in the month after that. And then when they've gone down a lot, then in a tasteful way, using prioritized testing, you can start to reopen a lot of things like schools and work. Probably not sports events, because the chance of mass spread there is quite large. Mm-hmm. And so to get back economically, taking the pain extremely now and telling those who wouldn't curb their activities, no, you must go along with the rest of society and not associate in a way that we have exponential increase in these cases, that is the right thing, even though it's extremely painful. It's unheard of, and there are particular businesses that it's catastrophic for. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you get so you can feel like you can say to the entire population, ideally in the early summer if things go well, yes, now please do resume, and we are, through testing, making sure that it won't spread in some very, very big way. So people will need the confidence that the system is working and smart people are making decisions. And over-optimistic statements actually work against that.
What-
Save months because every month counts. Things can reopen if we do the right things in the summer, but it won't be completely normal. You'll still be very worried. We may decide masks are important, although right now they're in short supply for health workers, so people should not go and hoard those. But the capacity of that can be brought up, so it may be something that, like China today, everybody who's walking around is wearing one of those. So we'll have a lot of unusual measures until we get the world vaccinated. 7 billion people, that's a tall order, but it is where we need to get to, despite a lot of things in between now and then, to minimize the damage.
You predicted this pandemic almost to a T, and maybe it was because we were dealing with other things at the time. We didn't really pay that much attention. Is there anything else you want to warn us about now that we should be looking forward to? Is there anything else that keeps you up at night?
Well, this is a naturally caused epidemic, and as bad as it is, it looks, if you have reasonable treatment, to have a 1% fatality. There could be epidemics that are worse than that, including ones that aren't naturally caused, that are a form of bioterrorism. But one thing I feel good about is this is such a big change to the world that this time it won't be like Ebola, which was just there in West Africa or Central Africa. This time, the tens of billions to have the diagnostic standing by, the vaccine manufacturing standing by, this time we will get ready for the next epidemic.
Well, I hope your words are prophetic once again. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck in all of your work, and stay healthy out there. We need you.
Hey, thanks, Trevor.
Hopefully we'll be playing tennis again soon.
You bet. Looking forward to it.